you have been
Yeah.
you came through my living room in the mid '80s at ESPN, and you've been there ever since, which is pretty amazing. And so your longevity in your career is something we could talk about forever. And you've always made sports fun. So I just wanted to thank you for that. You do an amazing job, and you keep it so fun and light. And you always have.
Well, thanks, Pete. I mean, it's supposed to be right. We did grow up, my generation, in simpler times, so we signed up for, in essence, the toy department. I mean, that's the way we viewed it when we were coming up. If we wanted to be involved in controversy and negativity, we were going to be in news. We weren't going to be in sports, right? So we were going to be the outlet for those that were seeking refuge in their lives to find some happiness, So I try to continue to bring that to the games that we're describing. And yeah, I know it's a serious business. I know people are more on edge now than they used to be. That's our culture. It's just the evolution of life. And to some extent, I presume I'm that way too. But at the same time, there are those moments when I think we need to remind ourselves that this is just that. It's fun. So let's have it. And it's funny because there are times when you have to get down to business in a game, just the facts. You know what's important and what isn't. But I've oftentimes said that I don't necessarily gauge what great is in our profession by simply how a big moment is handled. I think if you're doing a game that's less than thrilling and you're somehow able to keep those that are still with you while the rest of the world is tuned out, but those hardcores are still watching, if you're able to make them happy and you're able to keep them engaged, then that's the mark of a great broadcaster. Anybody can handle a big moment if you've got great judgment, but not everybody can handle a really bad game that you're trying to make entertaining and to some extent informative for the people that are still with you. So I oftentimes say we can all get lucky and have those big moments, and how you handle it is going to be your legacy. But I value the great broadcaster. When I watch a game and I'm watching other young people coming up broadcasting, I want to see how they handle a bad game. It's 10-0 in the eighth, and you're calling the game for the home team, and they're behind. Or it's 45-7. We're starting the fourth in a game that we thought was going to be good. So as you're emptying your bucket, how good is that bucket? I want to know how good that bucket is the broadcaster has at his disposal. So I view it a little differently because I grew up knowing this was what I was going to do. It's all I can do. As you saw, just trying to get on with you today was not easy for me. So I don't have my own engineering system here at the Chateau, but I do feel like this particular craft, the craft of broadcasting, whether it is in the studio or at a game, is something that I was born to do.
You do it well, and part of your career, you mentioned news. You started off, or part of your start was in a newsroom in Baton Rouge, and at that point in time, you got the opportunity to start to freelance for ESPN. You're calling games, and you start to have some real success, right? This is around like 85, 86, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so you end up doing the first iteration of College Game Day. Steve Borenstein, it's his brainchild, and you're in the driver's seat of this brainchild. You, Lee Corso, Beano Cook, if I'm correct, right? And
yeah.
This is some context to where Howard Schwab comes into your life. Which is, I wanted to bring some context to somebody. You had such a beautiful post about him on Facebook, and it was a different perspective than I had been taking in over the course of the past week or so. When did he really officially come crashing into your life?
The moment I was told that I wasn't going to be doing play-by-play for college football and that I was going to be hosting this show called College Game Day, which when I signed to move up to Connecticut, I'd been freelancing, as you mentioned, with them from 1985 all the way through 86, and I did every imaginable sport that they could get on the air. And back in those days, they were struggling to get, quality programming because Getty Oil owned it. They didn't have a lot of money. So I think probably the biggest moment that I called in football was the Herschel Walker run in the USFL to break the single season rushing record in June of 1985. And I did that in a week, Pete, where someone, I think it was Wes Durham, maybe earlier this week, was talking about young Mike Monaco's schedule.
Yep.
This past and all the games he did, and it reminded me immediately. And I know Mike, and I've worked with Wes. Wes and I did ACC games together for Raycom when I was doing their ACC tournaments and whatnot. We would share that post after Tim Brandt retired. So for about 4 years, and I knew his dad. I knew Woody really, really well from his days in North Carolina. When he wrote this complimentary tweet about on X about Monaco's schedule this week and all that he had done, I was reminded of that week when I was doing the game in the Meadowlands with Mike Hafner. Now, there's a name from the past, Broncos wide receiver that worked at NBC for a number of years. We're doing the game in East Rutherford, New Jersey on a Thursday. And then I fly from there to Hull, Quebec, Canada for a Saturday night PKA karate show with this, I want to say, middleweight world champion, Jean-Yves Theriault. And PKA karate, for those of you that don't know, would be sort of taekwondo with boxing gloves on. In other words, a lot of guys getting kicked in the you-know-what, all right? plus they're boxing. Combination MMA, right, UFC kind of thing, if you want to modernize it, call it that. But they were introduced and they came into a squared circle. It looked like a heavyweight championship bout, all right? That's what it looked like.
How many people were there?
So I do that on Saturday, and then I fly from there to Starkville, Mississippi to do a Sunday night college baseball game with Rafael Palmeiro and Will Clark playing against LSU when Skip Bertman was in his second year as head coach at LSU in college baseball. We used to have a Sunday night college baseball game every week. So those were 3 different sports in 2 different countries over a 4-day span. And I was loving every minute of it. Okay, the journey. You always see me say at the end of a lot of my posts, hashtag the journey's the best part, which it is.
Yes.
And when I see these moments for guys like Monaco and others, and it was really nice of Wes to do that. I think more broadcasters, more guys that do what we do need to support one another. It's a very competitive business. It's easy to start thinking about, well, I should have gotten that job instead of that guy. And, we really don't take good care of one another. We should be better to one another, in my view. So I try to do that on social media as much as I can. And sometimes people are confused by even that. How can he be so nice to somebody? They're like, oh, he's just looking for a compliment. There are always these rogue underbellies of anything that you try to do that's nice in social media. But that's who I am. That's how I roll. That's what I do. But to answer your question, I was told by Bornstein Steve said to me, Tim, here's what you got to do. You're going to do the first preview show in college football history. They didn't do ABC. Pino was doing halftimes and postgame. They never had a pregame. We're going to be like the NFL today of college football. Okay, that's what it's going to be. And I'm like, okay, I'm in.
It
wasn't what I want. It wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah, were you buying what he was selling? Were you buying it?
Huh?
Were you buying what he was selling?
Oh yeah, I was buying it because by that time Musburger was a star, and he was telling me, "You're going to be my college football star." He was selling me on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I can do that. I like the idea that my versatility in both the studio as well as play-by-play was there. At the time I was hired at ESPN, Getty Oil had just sold to Cap Cities when I became full-time. Bornstein had just taken over. A lot of the people from the old regime, Scotty Conlon had been at NBC, and several others were in charge of production in 85 and 86. They were sort of moved, not out, but they didn't have the position of head of production as Steve Bornstein did. And he was taking control. I mean, he was flat out taking control. And he was a fan of mine. And that was his vision for me. And he also had a vision that the guys in the studio were going to be the stars in sportscasting, not necessarily the play-by-play guys, which he and I, kind of went to battle over that. I was never satisfied just being in the studio, and my contract said as much. I'm going to do at least 30 shows on the road. That's the only way I was going to move up there. And at that time, none of the studio people, not Mees, not Berman, not Bob Lee, none of them were able to go out and do games. So you can imagine the old guard when I got there and had the deal like that. I thought I was going to be persecuted by those people. I thought I was in trouble. But I came in the same week as John Saunders, my best friend in broadcasting there. He came in from Baltimore and I came in from Baton Rouge. We were paired together to do Sports Centers, but John was going to be his hockey guy and his baseball guy and his basketball guy. I was going to be his college football guy. And he was just like, Brando, Berman is the bomb on the NFL. When we get the NFL, he's the guy. This is college, you're the guy. That was the way Steve looked at it. And so I was flattered that he felt that way. And then Terry Lingner, who was our coordinating producer, is now an independent producer in Indiana, in Indianapolis, does a lot of great work. Terry was one of the cornerstones and foundation members of ESPN's success. He and Steve Anderson were the first two coordinating producers they had. Terry said, okay, Tim, here's your guy. He's your research guy, Howie. And Howie was hired, not full-time at that point, not a staffer, but he is your guy for college football, all things college football. And so this was in the fall of '86. And after that season, by the end of the '87 season, he was made staff as a staff researcher because they understood that what he was doing for us, he could do for SportsCenter. Okay. Why wouldn't you use, as Dan Patrick said, Google before Google, Howie Schwab, to be kind of the guy that was handling all your factual information all day long. But that was just an opportunity that Howie seized upon. I think all of us in this business have to look at our careers and say, how do we take care of ourselves when there are found opportunities? Okay, when an opportunity comes your way, what do you do with it? And I think that's the key. Okay, we're going to get breaks and we're going to get disappointments. And how you handle disappointments is important. There are times when I haven't done a good job of that. But I think even more importantly, how do you handle opportunities? What do you do with those opportunities? If you're just living in the here and now, you might get frustrated and not go anywhere. But if you take advantage of that opportunity, you can use that opportunity to jettison your career. And in Howie's own way, behind the scenes, that's what he was doing. And he had in his mind a vision of not just research for college football, but how badly does this startup network that was still in its infancy need him? And Terry Lingner, I think, and I quoted him in my post that you were talking about. He said he was a absolute secret weapon for a startup network like ESPN, and he clearly was. All due respect to my friends that are there now, I don't think any of their studio shows, with the exception of Steve Levy in the hockey studio the other night, when he had a really heartfelt thought about Howie and what he meant to ESPN through the years. Anything that was written for any of those SportsCenter shows that had to be pre-approved, I don't think they did not point out how transformative a career Howie Schwab had and how he really was the backbone of the information success that they had to be able to call themselves the worldwide leader. If you're going to call yourself the worldwide leader, you better be able to prove it. And if you get something wrong, and trust me, even then, when you got something wrong, it was noticed. It wasn't noticed by as many people because we didn't have as much of an audience. We only had about 25 million subs in 1986, 87, in that era. But if you were going to be taken seriously, you had to get facts correct, and Howie made certain of that. So in building not only an opportunity for himself, but an entire department, when he was let go, and I think that's the most heinous thing that ESPN ever did, and all of its many cutbacks that were less than desirable, because a lot of other great people were let go, many producers, directors, and people that served in all kinds of different areas that make a network function. But Howie's even more so because of what he had done through the years for literally every sport that they had on their air, plus SportsCenter on a daily basis. How you could let him go made no sense to me. That was a bottom line across the board cut where they had an entire department, and they said, okay, Howie is the head of that department. He's making way too much money. So let's get rid of him and let these underlings do the job. That was just beneath contempt to me. And Steve Bornstein had built that place in so many ways on loyalty. He and I were at odds, and I left ultimately and moved back home to Louisiana in large measure because I couldn't be a team player and stay in Connecticut. My wife was from Louisiana. I was from Louisiana. And I was like, hey, I can do this. If you want to fly me up to be in the studio, I'd be happy to do that. But I'm not going to stay up here year round and do 2:30 Sports Centers when I could be out doing some other stuff.
Yeah.
And I had some opportunities to do that. So Steve and I were at odds then. And I did get a new deal short term, and I stayed at ESPN another 4 years. But my importance to the company was lost when I left Connecticut. And so I knew I was on a short leash after that. And by the mid-'90s, I was gone and on my way to Turner.
Well, I think I read somewhere that you said that Steve told you, looks like you've done all right for yourself, right?
Yeah. Well, because Steve ultimately left too, right?
Yeah.
And went to the NFL. And he was the guy that raised as they say, raised the number that ESPN was going to have to pay to hold on to the NFL. So, it's a small business, and what goes around comes around. And I was at a meeting at CBS. I'd been at Turner in the mid-'90s. I was doing Raycom and Jefferson Pilot SEC games in the early window, and I was flourishing and working around the clock. I was doing Braves, Hawks for Turner, and I was doing the playoffs, the NBA for them. In addition, I was literally working around the clock back then, and CBS hired me. And by the time I ran into Steve and he was running the NFL, it was at a college football and NFL seminar that we had together in New York at Bobby Van's. And Steve tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, Brando, give me a blanking drink." And I said, "Yeah, sure, Steve." And we laughed and joked about it. And because by that time, Fowler had moved in. He didn't replace me. Bob Carpenter did for 1 year. So Chris wasn't even ready to be the host in their minds when I left. He came a year later. But that job had morphed into an iconic position. And you see now Chris is doing the biggest games in college football because of the leverage he gained from doing it. I would have never had and didn't have the patience to be at a place that long, to wait that long for that opportunity and to do all the things he did. And Chris really invested himself in doing that show. For me, College Game Day was great, and I learned a lot from it. I think I became a better broadcaster because of my time in Connecticut. But I was always in a hurry to get to the booth, always in a hurry to get to the games. I even at CBS, the opportunity to host the College Football Today in the SEC on CBS was in large measure because of what I'd done years earlier at ESPN. I know that. But CBS also gave me opportunities to do a lot of games, a lot of big games, football and basketball.
Yeah, you were doing the NFL while you were doing some of the college NFL Today.
That was before. Yeah, that was before there was an NFL network and before there were Thursday night games. And so, Spencer and I would double up.
Yeah, you guys were in the studio and then you do games. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, we'd do a game. We'd do the studio on Saturday, fly to the NFL site on a Thursday, meet with coaches, leave our material at the hotel we were staying at for the NFL game, go to New York, do the studio, and then run out to Teterboro, hop in a jet and go, somewhere usually close by, like Cincinnati or Cleveland. We did a lot of Achilles Smith.
Dude, I remember. So, Tim, this is a blast from the past.
They were really bad. A lot of that, a lot of Bills, a lot of Bengals. The Chargers, Bengals, that had our name written all over it. back in those days.
You guys, so I was lucky enough. I was working for Gary Horton in a company called The War Room. So we would come by the studio on Saturday sometimes. I'd be there with Todd McShay. And you and Spencer were so generous with your time. And I remember you were the first person that really illustrated that Kelly Smith was in trouble. You said we had him. We talked to him pregame, and he was pretty obvious he wasn't 1,000% invested.
Yeah, Todd was he and Pat Kerwin were busting their chops, man, with the NFL show.
Yeah,
and so we all would congregate and gather, usually over at Ben Benson's, and get the latest. That was only 2 blocks away from where we were staying on West 54th between 6th and 7th.
Yeah.
At the Regal Royal.
The Regal Royal. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. So back to Schwab real quick. How important is a guy like that for a studio host or a play-by-play guy? I think sometimes, and you're pretty illuminating or transparent, I should say, about how important those guys are in helping you. I mean, that helps your confidence. It helps your timing. It obviously factually.
Right. Well, in baseball and basketball, there is no guy that's in the booth that's more important than your statistician. Okay. In football, he's still very important, but your spotter is even more important.
Yeah.
But your relationship with your spotter, A, needs to be good, and B, you need to trust him. Okay. When the ball is tipped, and he's doing this, you're able to say it was tipped. Because when you're calling the game, you're watching the whole field. But you're also, when the ball's dead, going to the monitor because you want to keep up with what graphics or replays. And you're also listening to the producer tell you where to go and what Spencer or whoever the analyst might be is where he's going. There's a lot of choreography in that booth that people don't realize until they get up there. So your spotter is very important. Brett Bender, who's Gary Bender's son, has been with me for a couple of decades now doing that.
That's somebody you trust.
Somebody I really trust. And a lot of guys don't do their boards themselves, their spotting boards. I do. So he's got to come to terms with the way I do things, and he has. So I'm old school in that regard.
You do your own boards. You write them out.
I do.
Wow.
Yeah, I do. I'll show you here real quick.
Yeah. I got to be honest, even though I do the Tony Britt. Wow.
Here's the Ducks and the Trojans from last year. Bo Nix against Caleb Williams. All right. So that's, let's see, that would be the Oregon offense against the USC defense, such as it was. And this is the USC offense against the Oregon defense.
So when you have a Thursday, Saturday, you're still writing out both?
I'm doing it myself because if I don't do it myself, again, this is a baby boomer thing.
Yeah.
I may not really look at it that much. There are some anecdotal things that I would write down.
Yeah.
I only want to have to write it once when I'm doing my meetings. So my skeleton boards have got to be ready before my meetings start. So, on Monday and Tuesday, I'm really working on that pretty hard and then looking at tape. In those days, we would go in to meet the NFL guys on Thursday instead of Friday, because on Friday, we need to get to New York to get ready to do the studio show on Saturday. Huh. So we would go in, spend all day Thursday where the home team was playing in the NFL, get through with that, hustle to the airport, Spencer and I would, and then fly in. Our producers would, obviously for the game, would stay where they are. We would always meet with the away team via conference call, for those games. And the NFL approved that. They were fine with it. Dennis Lewin was in charge in those days, and he trusted Spencer and me. So we were fine. And the coaches loved it because it meant their Friday was free. If we were coming, it meant Friday was free. So, but that was a lot of fun, and it kept me on the bike. It kept me on the play-by-play bike. And as I said, we only did probably 5 or 6 games, but on occasion they were big games. Mm-hmm. On occasion we got better games. I remember one year we were assigned, and I don't know why. I'm sure enough some of the other play-by-play guys were pissed. Like Don Crickey or someone like that. It was like doing the 5 or 6 game, because we're not doing that. We're doing like the 7th game. We wound up doing the Bengals at the Jaguars when Brunell was trying to get a number one seed, okay, in the AFC. I mean, that was a thrill to get to do that game. And Blake was playing quarterback with the Bengals. They weren't bad. They played pretty well.
Jeff Blake, yeah.
Blake.
Yeah.
And we got a good game out of that. That was the Tony Baselli, Jaguars team that –
oh yeah, they never could get over the hump and get there.
Yeah. But they did get they did win that game, and they got the top seed, and they wound up, I think,
they lost.
They wound up.
They lose to Tennessee.
Bounced, I think. The Tennessee, I think.
Yeah.
But it was a blast, and we also got the record-breaking single game rushing record for Lewis for the Ravens against the Browns.
Yeah.
If you remember that.
Sure.
The former Tennessee running back that played for the Ravens set the single game rushing record. And that was a thrill, and not necessarily a game that people were pining away to get the call, but as it turned out, I think that was in 2000, maybe.
Yeah, it was.
Jamal Lewis.
Yeah.
That sound right?
Yeah.
So there were thrilling moments that we got, even though it was a lot of work but it was a lot of fun, and I was getting to wear all the hats that I wanted to wear. But to your point, those guys are incredibly important to you in terms of the play-by-play guy getting the information that he needs. If you just are trying to do it on your own and you're just looking at notes, you can go through mounds and mounds of notes. You need to have guys that can find the things that they know work on television. Okay. And good, bad, and indifferent, not always just, what their strengths are, but what their weaknesses are too.
Yeah. So
that's very helpful to us. But I don't know that management has ever quite understood. And I think the Schwab passing is to me proof of that, because if you look back at what was said, and I'm not saying, and I'm not disregarding that some of what was said had to be said, but Howie was much more than just a statistician / producer that became noteworthy because of Stump the Schwab. I mean, that was, to me, the portrayal of his impact. If you watched ESPN most of last week, that's what you were hearing. And, that played really well for the people that were in their mid to late 30s or 40s that knew about Stump the Schwab, but they didn't know about, hey, he was hired to be the first researcher in network history for College Game Day, and it evolved into this. And soon he became in charge of the bottom line. Who's the guy that's making sure what you're seeing on the bottom line is showing you all that information 24 hours a day? It was Howie. Okay.
Wow.
I mean, and his staff. So he was much more, okay, than just a statistician / producer that would become more well known because Stuart Scott and he did Stump the Schwab. I mean, and God bless Stuart and he did a great job on that show, but Howie was much more than that. That was my point.
Well, one last thing about Howie, and then I'll let you get on with your day. You mentioned in that post, and I thought this was really cool, about his personality. You said he was charming, and he was sort of just had this way about him. And you said that was sort of like lightning in a bottle. Somebody that was that young and that talented, it was rare for them to have that ability to be humble and just kind of know how to roll with it. Somebody who got it. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, he could be Howie was such a likable, charming guy. He could also rib you. He could get away with some digs because no one could ever state it. You can never get mad at Howie. So he loved to bust balls. And, of course, Game Day originally was all about ball busting. Okay, that whole setup was ball busting because Bino busted balls better than anybody. Okay, and everyone was, everyone was targeted. It didn't matter who you were, what your background was. Unbelievable. He would get going, and how he loved to, and he would imitate Bino from time to time. He would call me, Brando, you're the very, very best. And I love Terry. I talk about my wife. I love Terry. She's Italian, but she's not a ball buster. So many women are ball busters. She's not. she gets it, that kind of stuff. Howie would do the same thing. And one year I was doing, and this was what happened with anchors sometimes in their off season. They would throw you on another show. Like they didn't have the NBA, but they had this show called NBA Today. And somebody normally hosted it that was one of the Sports Center anchors, but they were on vacation. They asked me to do it. So I get through with my little piece, and I would say, I enjoyed my stay on the NBA Today. And Howie's like, you effing did not. You can't stand the NBA. I want to hear that. I enjoyed my stay. He would call me up. I enjoyed my stay on the NBA. So he could bust your chops. The last message I got from Howie Schwab, and this is, and again, I'm going to run the risk of upsetting my dear friend Dick Vitale, who did more for Howie and cared more for Howie than anybody. As Dick has always cared for everybody. That's just who Vitale is. But I have not made it. And he was my first analyst that I ever worked with on a game at ESPN. January 5th, 1985. I have another prop for you. Here's another prop, Pete. This is the check stub, copy of the check stub. January 5th, they paid me on February 5th.
That's my birthday.
January 5th, okay? They paid me on January 5th. You see, ESPN, there's the check, copy of it, for Duke and Virginia for a whopping $300. There you go.
It's not a bad game, though.
It was number 2 Duke against Virginia with Dickie V, which to me, living in Baton Rouge, getting my first opportunity on ESPN at age 29, I was through the roof. Are you kidding me? I was as excited as I could be. Actually, I may have been 28, about to turn 29. Either way, I was excited. But Dick has this gala in May, a fundraiser for, the V Foundation, which is near and dear to his heart. And my schedule for a number of years got in the way of it. And then some sickness at home with my wife has kept me from going. And a couple of years ago, we almost went. COVID hit. I think that was when we were really going to go. And COVID hit, so we couldn't. But I had to tell Howie again that I was not going to be able to make it. So on Wednesday before he passed away on Friday, and I had talked to him maybe on that Tuesday. So Wednesday before he passes away, Friday night going into Saturday morning, I get a message from him. I'm going to hold on to it. I'm never going to, and when I see Dick, I'm going to play it for him because I love Dick and he loves me. But I know he's upset with me because I still haven't made one of these. And I think this is his 19th coming up. I think next year is going to be the 20th gala. So Howie calls me up, leaves a voice message, and it says, Timmy B. Schwab. So I just got off the phone with Dickie B, and he's like, Howie, I can't believe it. Brando's going to go 0 for 19? 0 for 19 on the gala? Are you kidding me? So Schwab wanted to make sure that I knew that Dick was, again, a little bit upset with me. Okay. And so I just texted him back. I tried calling him back, missed him. Then I texted him back. I said, Howie, I've got a full family vacation the last week in May. Terry can only go, I can't take her on trips of that magnitude within 2 weeks. I just can't, and he was like, so he wrote me back. He said, I know. I'm just blanking with you. So that was my last correspondence with Howie. But that's just who he was, and what made him so lovable was that he could, and he knew this, he could give you all kinds of grief, and he knew he could get away with it because he was so beloved. I could go to a St. John's game, literally be 30 minutes from air, and he would be like, so here's some like 5 factoids, Tim, you probably didn't know. And I've got all my research. We've got good people. I use a really good researcher, Jeff Chapman, who does a tremendous job. and his people in terms of putting together the work that I need to get ready for multiple games in a week. And my statistician, Ethan Cooperson, on site is as good as it gets. He works with Nance on the A team in the truck, okay, coordinating between the graphics as well as the talent stats for Jim. Ethan works with, and when he leaves me, he goes and generally works with Brandon Gaudin some in the Big Ten, with the Big Ten Network. And he does Andrew Catalan's work in the NCAA tournament, who replaced me when I left CBS. So he's tremendous, does great work. But Howie still's got 4 or 5 just pure nuggets that are St. John's related because he loves St. John's so much. And he's like, and he says, well, he leaves me 5 of them. And he says, if you don't use 3, I'm pissed. 1, 2, 4, and 5 are okay. But 3 must make air. And then as the game goes on, I get a running commentary from him. On my phone, I'm checking my phone. People say, why do you have your phone on? Why are you checking your phone? No, I'm not going to social media. I don't give a rat's ass what is being said about me by, viewers. I don't. Now, I might look at them after the game and have some fun with a few of them afterwards if I want. But I'm checking to see if what Howie's telling me, okay? I want affirmation from Howie Schwab that what we're doing here is good.
Yeah.
And I think he's been that way with just about everybody he's ever worked with, okay? And it doesn't matter what network you're on. Howie, once you're one of Howie's guys, you're one of Howie's guys for life. And I'm going to miss that part of him, Pete. You have no idea the sadness that I'll have when, especially when I'm doing a St. John's game in the future, when I can't go to my phone and see, what Howie had to say.
Tim, thank you so much for spending time today talking to me about Schwab and about your career. I could go forever, and I really appreciate it. You mean a lot to a lot of us, so I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Pete. And I do. The more we talk, the more I remembered our times there in the empty room.
Yeah.
At CBS. It jogged my memory just hearing your voice, and I'm glad to see you're doing so well, and your careers move forward in that area and out front. So many guys that are doing it, now play by play or whatever. They came up a different way.
Yeah.
Todd McShay became Mel Kiper's rival, right? Yeah. Well, we saw him in formative days.
Yep.
Pumping information into Boomer or Dan Marino or whomever. And, those NFL shows couldn't have gotten on the air without Pat Kerwin, right?
Yes.
Pat's a sweetheart of a guy, and he is a fixture on Sirius. If ever Fox asked me to do a game, and I don't do nearly as many as, I think the last game I did was the 30 for 30 Jameis Winston game when he threw the pick in overtime.
Oh, yeah.
Atlanta game.
Yeah. To
get to 30 interceptions and 30 touchdowns.
Yeah, that was a few years ago.
Yeah, it was back 19. I think it was 2019.
Okay.
And what was great about it was I got to work with Matt Millen, whom I had not worked with, and I love that.
Yeah.
So we had a great time. And it was just before COVID, so it was the 2019 season. And in a December game, like mid-December, I think it was, the last regular season game of the year. And during that period, I would, if ever I got an NFL assignment, I would tune into Pat, listen to his show on
Move
Sirius.
The Chains. It's really good.
Move the Chains.
Yeah.
And I would do the same thing with a lot of other guys that I trust, that I know. I've always said, if it's like playing golf with somebody that's maybe 3 or 4 shots better than you, you're going to play better if you're playing with golfers that are better than you. You just are. Okay. If you're any kind of athlete, you're going to step up and play a little bit better. I think as a broadcaster, you're going to be better if you surround yourself with people that know more than you know.
Yeah.
Because I prided myself on my background in college football and history. And there are times when I could call something up immediately because I did care about it. And I cared about it as a child, but I also knew that there were things that happened before I was born. Bino had this great line, and if you don't mind, I might swear a little bit here.
Go ahead.
he would say, Brando, you're unfucking believable. You know shit that happened before you were born. Do you know how few people do? And I'm like, well, Howie, that's just, my nature. It's college football is about history. You're damn right it is. He said, I tell people, just because it happened before you were born doesn't mean it's any less significant. And so true.
So true.
The lack of context today, the single biggest problem in the way sports is being presented today is like everything else, it lacks context. Okay, what's happening with records? Who's the best ever? What made this game the best? People aren't considering the things that happened before them. Okay?
The sense of history is lost a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, I love Caitlin Clark. I think she's done for women's basketball more than anybody in my lifetime. However, I'm not going to say she was better than Cheryl Miller. I'm not going to say she was better than Lynette Woodard. Okay, I was around then, before the NCAA even sanctioned women's basketball. But if the question is who's done the most for women's college basketball, it's got to be Caitlin Clark, no doubt about it. But if the question is who's the greatest women's player of all time, I think that's open for debate. The lack of context, whether it's that sport or the NFL or college football, any of those things, and that little ghost of Dino, and now the spirit of Howie being with him, will always permeate, in my cranium. I can tell you that.
Tim, thank you so much.
Thank you, Pete.
Hey, I really appreciate the time, man. It means a lot.
Oh, this was fun.
Yeah.
I loved it. I'm so glad we figured it out.
Yeah, you got it, man. I'll be in touch. Thank you so much, Tim.
We are Rogue Media Sports.